Hello, everybody, and welcome to the show. This is Multifamily Chronicles, and I'm your host, Adrian Danila. My guest today is Lauren Penn. Lauren is Business Development Manager for Kustom. Welcome to the show, Lauren.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here. I have so much to talk about. I want to tell you a little bit about myself first. I am National Business Development Manager for Kustom US. We are a nationwide disaster recovery firm, and we've been around for over 50 years. Great organization, third generation family. We have roughly 31 offices nationwide, and we're kind of strategically placed so that we can respond to disasters. We can pull resources from other offices so that we really have the continental US covered. We do some work internationally, and we are a 24/7. Something goes wrong, you've got an emergency, we've got your back. And so I have been with Kustom for about 4 years. And before that, I worked for 2 other restoration firms. And so I have 15 years of experience. So I'm looking forward to your questions and being able to drop some knowledge for you.
Excellent. Thank you very much for taking the time for me and for the audience. It's very important. Disaster recovery, it's a very important component when it comes to multifamily businesses. And what I learned myself is that we don't seem to ever be prepared for disaster. Not to say that we should be right on the ball within the next 5 minutes once it happens, but it's kind of everybody tends to panic first, and it takes a while for us to figure something, figure out a plan and actually start implementing, executing, and react. So, Lauren, what could you tell me about disaster preparedness? What would it help us as customers to be better prepared to respond to a disaster? Like having a plan in place. How would you advise? What would you advise us to do?
So I would say that it's a really great time, especially this time of year. In fact, this week is National Hurricane Preparedness Week. But it's a great time of year in the spring to kind of sit down, even if you're not in a hurricane-prone area, to sit down and really go over your plan. It can seem very daunting to put a plan together. I encourage you to reach out to your disaster recovery company. They are happy to sit down with you and help you come up with a plan. I encourage you to reach out to your insurance broker. They are also happy to help you kind of come up with a plan. I think it is really important to not only come up with a plan, but to go over it with your team, your staff. There are times where we see, the general manager or the main person in charge is not available. In a widespread disaster, they might have something go on with their family that they need to attend to. So it's really good to have layers of that plan in place and a lot of different people within the organization aware of what the plan is. The plan, is more than just, hey, make sure we have everyone's numbers on paper or stored in our phone in case we're not on site to make these calls to these vendors. But a plan can also include, you have a disaster recovery firm that you call for your leaky toilet or some kind of water loss, but you might have a widespread disaster that it could be a fire, it could be vehicular impact, it might not just be a hurricane. And so some useful things to do is ahead of time have your subcontractors that you work with on a daily basis, your plumbers, your engineering firms, have them vetted into your restoration contractor so that when that emergency happens, you're using your subs that are familiar with your building, and they are coordinating with the restoration contractor to help get that work done quicker, and it goes a lot more smoothly. Another thing I encourage when you're thinking of your plan, and I think everyone at this point in their career kind of understands, the general plan, evacuation plans, sorry about that, evacuation plans, critical to have those phone numbers. I see, you go into the OG property manager's office and they've got printouts of, numbers on their bulletin board or written on their whiteboard. And it's like, well, why do you have that? Well, they have that because probably sometime in their career, technology has failed them. So they have backups of that information. And so it is really critical, I would say, go ahead and print it out, but definitely at a bare minimum, make sure it's saved into your phone, and make sure it's saved into your phone in a way that you can remember it, right? So I'm telling you, my name is Lauren from Kustom, but a year from now, when you have a hurricane hit your property, you may not remember that. So you may want to save it as, emergency services or, disaster recovery or something like that, so that when you get that call at 3 o'clock in the morning, you're not trying to figure out, okay, who do I need to call? So I think those are important steps to take. I also encourage you to go onto FEMA's website. There's a lot of helpful information on the FEMA website, but it's really cool. There's a feature where you can look up floodplains, and you can look and see 50-year, 100-year, and if your property is located in a floodplain, there may have not been a flood in 50 years, but 100 years ago, that area could have been completely flooded out. And so the chances are, might be very slim chance, but the chances are there's a possibility that your property is vulnerable. So just kind of understanding your property's vulnerabilities, doing a walkthrough, maybe have the building inspected by a licensed professional to find out if it's vulnerable, if it has vulnerabilities. Definitely review your insurance, and make sure you understand the different nuances within your policies. What your deductibles are, what your responsibility is, if there's something, is to happen. And, that's definitely a very important number you want to have on that list. And, you got to make provisions for alternate communications and power. We all think if there's a widespread disaster like a storm, will I require a generator? Do you have a transfer switch in your building? Is it an easy situation where you can go plug the generator in, or is it going to be more complicated? Have you considered where that generator would go? That's something we run into a lot of times, with fires, because sometimes with fires, you've got to shut the building down. There's work that needs to be done. And we bring out these generators, and it can be a scramble trying to figure out where it's going to fit, because no one's ever considered that they might need a generator. And so these are kind of the things that you want to walk through ahead of time, so that when that emergency happens, you have it all sorted out already. Another key thing that comes up a lot is establish in writing what the emergency spends are. So typically everyone kind of has, I can sign off on up to this amount or that amount, but make sure that, in an emergency, unfortunately, we see this on fires, and, you've got people showing up to your property that may not belong there, vendors that are trying to sign work. Make sure that you manage that situation and don't have, employees just signing off on everything or anybody that comes to your property. And so in some cases, depending on what kind of property you have, you may want to establish a system of like badges or security for that purpose. We see that mostly with fires. You've got, you might have media showing up on site. You've got residents talking to media. You've got different staff members saying different, oh, it was this person's fault. This is what happened, and you really want to kind of control and maintain that output of information. So establishing that ahead of time is critical. In this day and age with social media and videos, and, you're thinking about your company's brand, and they are capturing everything, and a lot of stuff you might not necessarily want out on social media. So just really talking that through with your staff, like, this is a possibility. We kind of want to like minimize the information that gets out there, and just kind of walking through some of those steps. I think also like just preparing backup files outside of your office. for critical information that you might need, if your company allows that, but definitely, if something happens and everything's stored at your office and something, catastrophic happens to your office, you need to make sure you have that information stored off-site. So there's a lot that can go into disaster planning. I can take a much deeper dive. Just some quick tips that I've seen, throw your pool furniture in the pool if you know a storm's coming. If you've got an underground garage, get those cars off the bottom level, move them up. It doesn't matter if they're all blocking each other in, get them off that bottom level. That generator is critical, and definitely make sure that you know your restoration contractor. Have a couple backups. I would say don't just have one, because if there's a widespread disaster, chances are they might get busy. So make sure you have, layers to that. And also, make sure that you are in touch with your insurance broker and you understand your policy.
Great info. Thank you so much. So much great information. Thank you for sharing.
You're welcome.
So the next topic I want to talk about is claim management. Of course, we had a disaster. The disaster happened. We did what we could for mitigation, and now how do we manage claims? Because this is another thing that it's very challenging for us. It's not something that we as an industry face all the time, and because we don't do enough of it, thankfully, it's always a struggle remembering what the steps are. So what would be some tips that you would want to share for claim management to make the process less painful for a management company?
Yeah, no problem. So that's right. You guys don't deal with claims every day, and they're always very challenging. So, when a loss happens, you definitely want to at least report it to your broker, decide together if you're going to file a claim or not. Usually it depends on the amount of damage. If it's something small, typically you're not going to want to file a claim because you don't want that going against, your policy in the future. But, that is something that you and your insurance broker need to consult on. Notify them and then figure out what the next step is. But once that claim is filed and once that contractor comes out, it's kind of broken into a couple phases. There's the initial triage, and this can happen for a vehicular impact, water, fire, storm, whatever the emergency is. There is the initial stabilize the property, right? So that could mean set up a perimeter, a fence around it for security and protection. That could mean, stabilizing the environment, getting drying set up. That could mean, if there are residents that need to move out, coordinating where they need to go. Do they have their own renters policy? Is that built into their lease? Do you now have to kick in and figure out where they're going to be staying? Walking through that ahead of time and kind of understanding, and that can go into your disaster plan as well, figuring out, what those steps are. You might go over this with your staff, and you might have a couple of new staff members in a couple months that don't know anything about this. So it's just really key. And it kind of sets it up for a very smooth process if you kind of go into it knowing what to expect. And it's managing expectations, not just internally with your team, but also with the residents, right? So what's happening next? I can't go back into my unit. Where am I supposed to go?
I believe there's a connectivity issue. Your screen is kind of frozen. Not sure if you hear me. Can you see me and hear me well, Lauren?
Did I lose you?
I think we had a connectivity issue for maybe 30-40 seconds.
Okay.
So I think we're good now.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's the last thing you heard me say?
I was focusing on the, like trying to get back, trying to get back in. You're talking about the residents.
Yeah, so it's really critical managing expectations with residents. They are going to wonder how long they're going to be out of their unit. They're going to be, wanting those expectations and setting those expectations ahead of time is really critical. How are we doing with the connection? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear well, very well. Yes.
So, when there's an emergency after that initial triage, you've got work that's going to happen that we kind of consider part of the emergency situation. So we're drying, there could be some demo, but in an insurance claim, you've got a scope negotiation that's going to take place where your insurance adjuster is going to come out. They're going to take time to write a scope. Your restoration firm is going to take time to write a scope. And so sometimes there can seem like there's not a lot happening on site because there's things happening behind the scenes in terms of negotiating what's going to happen next. Okay. And so managing that with the residents and letting them know, like, hey, you may not see something happening on site right now, but the insurance company is negotiating the scope. The repairs will start very soon and we will get you back in your unit. And so that is, just managing the claim is a lot of managing expectations, really. And I think lean on your restoration contractor and make sure you've got a restoration contractor that you've got a good relationship with, that you can have those, candid discussions with.
You're mentioning, the relationship with your contractor. Would you mind sharing a few tips of how to vet a contractor, how to vet emergency vendors?
Yeah, I would make sure that your emergency vendor is someone that you trust and have a good relationship with. I always recommend having 2 or 3 backups, and maybe throughout the year, give a couple a try to see if you like working with them and how they work. Definitely, get in touch with and use your rep. Your rep can provide you with information. Your rep can help get the operations team moving faster. Your rep can really be an advocate for you with insurance. I know a lot of times property managers might not have time for different vendors stopping by, but forging those relationships ahead of time can make a huge difference. If you've got that widespread disaster and you've got a relationship with the rep, you might come up a little higher on that response list. So I would definitely encourage, forging those relationships if you can.
Lauren, I would like to focus next on the anatomy of a claim. And when it comes to 4 types of property emergencies and steps that are being taken in those situations. So let's focus on fire, flood, vehicular impact, and an outbreak or a biohazard. If you would briefly want to go over each one of these 4 categories.
Yeah, I would say, we've dealt with a pandemic, so I think we're all really familiar with how to handle before pandemic, it wasn't something people ran across very often, but, it's not just COVID-19. You can have norovirus outbreak, things you want to kind of contain. There can be biohazard situations. I've responded to murder scenes and some really difficult, challenging events that have happened at a property. But I think with the outbreak situation, or biohazard situation, again, making sure you have the right company responding. Not every restoration contractor does that service. So just make sure you can identify ahead of time who you're reaching out to for something like that. I think also when you have a situation like that, it's really good this is another situation where you kind of want to contain that output of information. You've have something very delicate like suicide at your property, or like I mentioned, some kind of outbreak. You really want to probably keep that stuff off social media. You may not want a whole bunch of trucks showing up to say biohazard all over it. It might make the other residents a little on edge. But I think, if you have a reputable contractor that can handle, volatile organic compounds, viruses, they will know what to do. And they're pretty comfortable kind of working within those parameters and kind of keeping things quiet, getting in and getting out, and returning the property back.
One thing that I wanted to touch on is, how do we manage expectations when it comes to our coworkers, our teammates, our residents on site, anyone that it's involved in a process directly or indirectly, it's affected, like it's in the middle of it.
Yeah, I would say, just having a good understanding and getting as much information and going through that information ahead of time. I just mentioned the biohazard, but there are challenges with the other types of claims. Vehicular impact, there could be structural damage. There could have been someone inside the building that needs to go to the hospital. And just kind of managing, there's going to be a lot of emotions involved. Making sure that structural integrity is still there. You may have to, it might be a front door. You may have to make, alternate provisions for access. And, with a fire, a lot of I would say with a fire, it's probably the toughest managing expectations, because there's so much that has to happen to that property. With storm damage or water damage, I think people kind of understand, like, okay, it has to dry. Maybe some building materials need to come out and get put back. With fire, there can be a lot more layers. And, just staying in front of those questions and anticipating what's going to happen next. And again, forge that relationship with your restoration contractor. Don't be afraid to reach out, ask them for reports, figure out what's happening next, get a schedule. I have even done like town hall meetings where I will go on site and do a question and answer. Property managers, engineers, they all have full-time jobs. Managing a claim is hard to do. It's another full-time job. So, having that town hall meeting where everyone can just get their questions out, and, you're not answering phone calls all day long, and you can tell people, hey, we're having this town hall meeting Tuesday night, save your question, come on out. And so that can kind of eliminate that. But, fires, there's so many different layers to cleaning soot, to, electrical issues, code upgrade issues, and the amount of water during a fire. Like, everyone forgets, the fire department, man, they do a number on a building. And I have seen fire departments, there will be a wide open glass double door, front of a building, and they will not open the door. They will just go crash through the window to bring their hoses in. It's just, there's so much damage when there's a fire. So that can be also really challenging to manage expectations. But I think communication is really key in managing expectations, and listening. And I always recommend that you do active listening. And so what that means is listen to what they're saying and repeat it back to them. You asked me this question, let me repeat it back. Is this what you mean? Because sometimes you might not hear it right, or sometimes they might not say it right. So, just really making sure that you're communicating properly, sending out those email notices, and, meeting with your team and meeting with your contractor so everyone's on the same page.
Lauren, this is one of the most jam-packed episodes that I ever had. Very informative. Actually, you made disaster management sound kind of like exciting and fun. So thank you very much. Thank you very much for for dropping all this knowledge here. For timing reasons, we're about to bring this to an end. I'd like to give you the last word, and then tell us maybe how could someone contact you in case that they're interested in starting a starting a new relationship with a disaster company like yours, how you could be contacted, anything else that we might have not covered during the episode.
There's so much that we haven't covered, so maybe we'll have to have a.
I'll get you. We're kind of coming to an end, but I promise you that if you would be interested, I'll get you to another episode. We'll do another one.
All right, I'm gonna hold you to that. So I can be reached at on my cell phone is the best way. I would give that out. It's 202-710-4115. And then you can also find me on LinkedIn. My name is Lauren Penn, and it's Kustom with a K. So feel free to reach out with questions. Happy to answer them. This has been awesome. Thank you so much, Adrian.
Lauren, thank you for coming. Really, really appreciate it. Again, great content. I hope to get you back here soon for another episode so we could get into more, in-depth information and details about